The private jet gleamed under the late afternoon sun, symbolizing class and power. Inside the first-class cabin, the space radiated opulence. Premium leather seats, soft golden lighting, and gentle background music created an atmosphere of absolute luxury. Tracey, a woman of color in her late 30s, boarded the plane with a calm demeanor and confident grace. She wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, her hair neatly pinned back, her face free of elaborate makeup, yet exuding poise and authority. Tracey didn't draw attention through the noise. Her quiet composure compelled others to notice. Standing at the cabin door was Anna, the head flight attendant for the trip. Dressed in a wrinkle-free uniform with sharp features and a cold, scrutinizing gaze, Anna smiled at every passenger who passed by, except for Tracey. When Tracey approached, Anna's smile vanished. She offered a stiff nod and a forced, "Welcome aboard." Behind Tracey were the Raymonds, an elderly white couple well known in elite circles. As soon as they arrived, Anna's expression changed instantly. Her bright smile returned as if flipped by a switch, and her voice softened. "Welcome back, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. It's a pleasure to serve you again." Tracey maintained her composed expression, but her eyes flicked quickly, noting the apparent difference in treatment. She said nothing, quietly moved to her seat at the front of the cabin, and sat down. She placed her handbag neatly under the seat, pulled out her phone, and checked her work emails. Less than a minute later, Anna approached Tracey with determined steps. Her voice was soft, but laced with implication. "Ma'am, I believe you're in the wrong seat. This section is reserved for elite passengers only." Tracey looked up, her voice gentle, but unwavering. "This is the exact seat listed on my ticket. Perhaps you should check the passenger list again." Anna squinted, her cold gaze sweeping over Tracey's suit and pausing at the modest leather bag under the seat. "I don't need to check," she replied, her tone sharpening. "I know exactly who belongs in this section and who doesn't." The atmosphere in the cabin began to shift. A few nearby passengers turned to look. A heavily made-up woman across the aisle glanced over, her lips curling slightly. A sharply dressed man on the opposite side quietly lowered his magazine and directed his gaze toward them. Tracey's expression didn't change. She sat upright, her eyes calm and steady, like the surface of a still lake. Anna folded her arms tightly, her eyes filled with judgment. "If you don't leave this seat, I'll have no choice but to call security." Tracey tilted her head slightly and replied, "Call whoever you want. I'm not going anywhere." Tension swept through the cabin, silencing everything for a few seconds. Those who had seemed engrossed in their phones, champagne, or magazines suddenly paused, watching the confrontation unfold. A standoff between a passenger and the woman in uniform who wielded the most authority on this flight. Tracey didn't yet know that this quiet act of resistance wouldn't just change the course of the flight. It would alter the fate of the person who had dared to underestimate her. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had now become still, as if suspended. Whispers began to ripple through the rows of seats, passengers stealing glances toward Tracey and Anna, where something unusual unfolded. With no intention of backing down, Anna folded her arms across her chest and stood squarely in the aisle, her icy gaze locked on Tracey. "I'll say this one last time," she stressed each word. "Either you move to the back cabin right now, or I'll call airport security onto this plane." Tracey remained seated, her eyes fixed on Anna. "I don't think you should be acting like this before checking the passenger manifest," she said gently, her voice calm, yet carrying an unmistakable authority beneath the surface. That line prompted a few nearby passengers to nod subtly, murmuring to one another. A distinguished-looking man near the aisle furrowed his brow, glancing at Anna with displeasure. On the opposite side, a blonde woman, the same one who had previously eyed Tracey, shook her head and whispered to her companion, "Maybe she's just trying to sneak into first class. One look at her outfit and you can guess. Anna heard it. She immediately turned toward the surrounding passengers, flashing a confident smile as if bolstered by a backup. "This is exactly why we have policies," she roared, addressing the entire cabin. "Not everyone respects order." But Tracey didn't respond to the insult. She adjusted her posture, resting one hand calmly on the armrest, her gaze still unwavering. "I'm not looking to cause trouble," Tracey said, "but I won't vacate a seat I have every right to occupy." Anna clenched her jaw and turned toward a younger flight attendant near the cockpit, Grace, a brown-haired woman whose face still bore traces of inexperience and unease. "Grace," Anna snapped, "escort her to the back cabin, now." Grace hesitated. She looked at Tracey, then back at Anna. The conflict was apparent in her youthful eyes. Are you sure? Maybe we should confirm." Anna cut her off. "There's nothing to confirm. Do as I say." The cabin fell utterly silent. Some passengers now looked visibly uncomfortable. An older woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, "She hasn't done anything. Why are they treating her like that?" The man in the tailored suit, who had been watching from the start, leaned slightly toward Tracey, his voice soft and friendly. "Are you all right?" Tracey turned to him and nodded slightly. "I'm fine. Thank you," she replied, her eyes full of gratitude for the small but timely gesture of support. Anna immediately intervened. "Sir, we kindly ask that you not encourage disruptive behavior. We are following proper procedures." The man frowned and replied in an even tone, "From where I'm sitting, I see a woman being treated unfairly, and the person causing the disruption isn't her." Anna was momentarily stunned, but rather than backing down, she grew even more agitated. "That's enough," she shouted, louder this time. "Either you get out of that seat, or I'll have security drag you out." Tracey tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady, composed, surprisingly calm. "You do what you feel you need to do," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." That response struck like lightning through the silent cabin. Tracey's words, though quiet, carried a force that made Anna pause for a moment. This wasn't the voice of someone trying to sneak into first class. It was the voice of someone who knew exactly where she belonged and why she was there. After the heated yet composed confrontation with Tracey, Anna turned and walked toward the service galley, her face flushed with barely contained anger. She clutched a tray of cold drinks tightly, making her way through the cabin with a forced smile as she served each row. But when she reached Tracey, she completely ignored her, as if the woman didn't exist. Tracey remained seated, her eyes calmly following Anna's every step, not uttering a single complaint. When Anna passed nearby again, Tracey spoke gently. "Excuse me, may I have a glass of water, please?" Anna froze momentarily, then tilted her head, eyes cold as she scanned Tracey from top to bottom. "I'll get back to you when I have time," she said curtly, walking off without turning back. A nearby passenger grimaced. A few others began whispering, but Tracey remained composed. She didn't respond. She turned to face the window, taking a deep breath to maintain her calm. Moments later, Anna returned with a nearly empty drink tray. As she passed Tracey's row, she noticed that she had slightly stretched her leg into the aisle, a perfectly normal act for someone sitting in a cramped seat for a while. However, Anna deliberately didn't adjust her course. In a sharp and intentional step, she walked straight into Tracey's leg, causing the tray in her hands to tip. Cold water spilt onto the floor and splashed across Tracey's skirt. Anna stepped back, pretending to be surprised. "You should really be more careful with where you put your legs," she roared, drawing the attention of several passengers. "You just made me spill the whole tray." Murmurs erupted. A few people widened their eyes in disbelief. A young man furrowed his brow and whispered, "Did she really just do that?" Tracey bent down, gently dabbing at her skirt with a tissue. Then she looked up at Anna, her gaze calm but piercing. "You walked into my leg," Tracey said, voice still soft and even. "I was just sitting, like any other passenger." Anna pressed her lips together, but before she could react, Tracey continued, this time with a firmer tone. "I only ask to be treated with respect, just like every other person on this flight. If that's too difficult for you, then perhaps you are the one who doesn't belong here." The entire cabin fell silent. A small ripple of shock spread from Tracey's row. The man in the tailored suit gave a subtle nod. Grace, the young flight attendant, stood frozen at a distance, her eyes wide in astonishment. She knew Tracey was right, but the person Grace feared was Anna. Anna stepped closer to Tracey, her expression darkening. "You think you can talk to me like that?" she snarled. And then, without warning, Anna raised her hand and slapped Tracey hard across the face. Smack! The sound of the slap cracked through the cabin like thunder in a clear sky. The first class froze. Passengers snapped their heads toward the noise. An older woman gasped and covered her mouth. Grace jumped, dropping the cloth in her hand. The man in the suit stood up abruptly from his seat. Tracey didn't move. She lifted her chin, hands resting lightly on her lap, her gaze now sharp as steel. Her face remained unnervingly calm as she stared directly into Anna's breathless expression. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Tracey said slowly, each word cutting through the air like a blade. Anna stood frozen, her palm still tingling from the impact, suddenly sensing something was wrong. The sound of the slap still echoed in the suffocating silence of the cabin. No one on the flight could believe what they had just witnessed. A lead flight attendant had slapped a passenger right in the middle of the luxurious first-class cabin. Tracey remained seated, her face disturbingly calm. Though the red imprint was still visible on her cheek, she didn't touch it or react. She just stared at Anna with a serene but razor-sharp gaze. Anna, breathing heavily, her hands trembling, still tried to maintain a look of defiance. "You think you have the right to speak to me like that?" she spat, struggling to regain control. Tracey didn't respond immediately. She turned her head to the window, took a deep breath, then looked back, her eyes locked on Anna's. "I've been patient with you," Tracey said, her voice soft but filled with quiet authority. "But your behavior has crossed the line." Behind them, Grace, the young flight attendant, stood frozen, still clutching her flight documents, her eyes wide with shock. She had seen it all, from the first disdainful glance to the slap. Her chest tightened. Grace turned and quietly stepped back toward the service galley. With trembling hands, she pulled her phone from her pocket and discreetly dialed. When the other end picked up, she spoke softly, but firmly. "This is Flight Attendant Grace from Flight 918. We have a serious incident. I need to report immediately to operations. A passenger has been physically assaulted, and that passenger is Ms. Tracey Williams." The voice on the other end instantly changed tone. "What did you say?" "Tracey Williams is on that flight?" Grace nodded, even though no one could see her. "Yes, and she was attacked by our lead attendant." Meanwhile, the passengers had shifted their stance back to first class. The man in the tailored suit, the one who had defended Tracey earlier, was still standing, arms crossed, his gaze locked on Anna as though waiting for an explanation. The older woman, Mrs. Raymond, sighed, disappointedly shaking her head. "Unbelievable," she whispered to her husband. Anna turned to the surrounding passengers, trying to regain her persuasive tone. "She's been disruptive from the beginning. You all saw it. I was just maintaining order." No one replied. They stared, started with quiet judgment and cold, piercing eyes. Tracey stood up, not in haste. She calmly adjusted the lapels of her blazer, her gaze no longer just composed, but radiating silent authority. She stepped toward Anna, just close enough to make the flight attendant instinctively step back. "You'll soon understand," Tracey said, her eyes fixed unblinkingly. What real consequences look like. Just minutes after the shocking slap, the cockpit door suddenly opened while the cabin was still thick with tension and silence. Out stepped the captain, a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform with a stern look. His expression was tense, as if he had just received essential news. He walked briskly toward the first-class cabin, his eyes scanning the space as if confirming something before stopping directly in front of Anna. "Lead Attendant Anna," he said, his voice low and firm. "I need you to step aside immediately." Anna furrowed her brows, confused. "Captain, I can explain. I was handling a disruptive passenger." But the captain cut her off. "You don't need to explain. I just received an urgent call from the airline's senior executive board." He turned, his serious gaze now on Tracey, and bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Tracey Williams, I apologize for everything that has happened. Headquarters has confirmed you are the official owner of this aircraft and the founder of this airline group." It was as if the air had been sucked out of the cabin. Passengers' eyes widened. Gasps, startled whispers, and murmurs of shock filled the space. The curly-haired woman seated opposite, the one who had sneered that Tracey must have snuck into first class, now sat with her mouth agape, speechless. The distinguished man in the suit nodded slowly with a knowing look, as if confirming what he had long suspected. Anna staggered back, her face pale. She stammered, "No, that can't be. This must be a mistake, right? She didn't say anything from the start." The captain didn't even glance at her. His attention remained on Tracey, his tone respectful. "We are preparing for an emergency landing per executive directive. All of your requests will be followed to the letter." Tracey nodded slightly, still as composed as she had been from the beginning. Anna looked around desperately, searching for support from the passengers, but all were silent. No one met her gaze with sympathy anymore. From the rear of the cabin, Grace, the young flight attendant, stepped forward, her eyes a mix of nerves and relief. She didn't need to say a word. The truth was now undeniable. Tracey wasn't just any passenger. She was the owner of the entire flight, and she had just been humiliated in the very space she had built. Tracey rose to her feet, poised and resolute. Her simple black suit now radiated an unmistakable authority. She straightened her jacket button and walked forward gracefully, passing through the entire first-class cabin's stunned silence and wide-eyed stares. When she spoke, her voice rang out clearly, not loud, but each word sliced through the air like a blade. "My name is Tracey Williams. I am the owner of this aircraft, and more than that, I am the founder and CEO of this entire airline." A gasp came from a female passenger behind her. A man murmured, "I just accidentally witnessed an earthquake." Tracey's eyes scanned the cabin and finally landed on Anna, now standing frozen, her hands clenched, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. "Flight Attendant Anna." Tracey's tone grew noticeably colder. "Your conduct today is a disgrace to the service industry, a humiliation to the team I've built with sweat, effort, and my own reputation." Anna stammered softly, I didn't know who you were." Tracey raised her hand, signaling her to stop. "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with basic respect. You didn't need to know whether I was an executive, a millionaire, or just an ordinary black woman, to understand that every passenger deserves to be treated with dignity and decency." She turned to the captain. "I want it confirmed that Ms. Anna will no longer be employed on any flights within my system, effective immediately." The captain nodded solemnly. "Understood and recorded, Ms. Williams." Anna now lowered her head, lips trembling. Her eyes scanned the cabin. No looks of sympathy, no voices of defense. She knew that every ounce of arrogance, discrimination, and humiliation she had projected was now coming back as a verdict. Tracey continued, her voice firm but composed. I'm not just terminating your employment. I am also ordering an immediate suspension of your access to internal systems and initiating a formal internal investigation to ensure that conduct like yours is never allowed to happen again." Silence fell across the cabin. A middle-aged passenger began clapping first. Then the applause spread, rolling across the rows like a wave, loud and echoing throughout the cabin. Tracey offered a slight nod of gratitude, then looked Anna in the eye, one last time. "Your arrogance today didn't just hurt me. It damaged the very image of an industry that should be built on respect, not prejudice." The atmosphere inside the cabin remained thick and heavy after Tracey's final declaration. Anna, once the haughty woman with a condescending gaze, now stood frozen, face pale, hands trembling and clenched together. Murmurs of outrage rippled throughout the passengers. "She slapped the owner of the plane. Can't believe something like this still happens in this day and age." Then, the cabin door opened. Two uniformed police officers stepped up from the stairway, connected to a black SUV parked beside the runway. Their uniforms were crisp, their movements firm and purposeful. One officer approached Tracey, giving a respectful nod. "We received a report from the airline. May I ask if you would like to press criminal charges for this incident?" The entire cabin held its breath. Tracey, standing tall with a calm but piercing gaze, slowly nodded. "Yes, I want her to be held accountable under the law. There are at least 10 eyewitnesses on board who saw her physically assault you without provocation." Anna stepped back, stammering, I didn't mean to. I lost control for just a second. I'm sorry." But the apology had come too late. With quiet but firm resolve, the second officer stepped forward and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Anna, you are under arrest for assaulting another individual in a public setting. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in court." Anna burst into tears, trying to resist the outcome, closing in on her. "Tracey, please, I didn't know you were the owner. If I had known, I never would have." Tracey looked her straight in the eyes, not with anger, hatred, or profound disappointment. "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me right. I stayed calm from the beginning. I gave you many chances to stop, but you chose to humiliate, insult, and then assault me. An apology means nothing if it doesn't come with accountability." Anna had no more words. She was escorted off the plane under every passenger's cold, disapproving stares. Inside the cabin, a loud round of applause broke out. No one needed to cue it. Everyone understood. Mr. Raymond, who had been sitting with folded arms since the start, stood up and roared, "Today, we witnessed a woman who didn't just defend her own dignity, but stood up for everyone who's ever been looked down upon and couldn't speak out." Tracey offered a gentle smile and bowed her head in acknowledgement. But in her eyes was something beyond victory, a quiet vow for something far more significant that was still to come. After Anna was escorted off the plane by the police, the atmosphere inside the cabin gradually settled. A profound stillness spread, not one of tension, but of understanding. All eyes now turned toward the woman standing in the center of the first-class cabin, Tracey, not just a passenger, but a symbol of dignity reclaimed through calm and resilience. Tracey turned to face everyone, her voice rising, not with bravado, not with drama, but simply, sincerely, and with weight. "I want to offer my sincerest apologies to all of you." The cabin fell silent, awaiting her words. No one should have to witness such a display of disrespect, especially on a flight that is meant to be safe, professional, and humane. As the owner of this airline, I hold personal responsibility for ensuring that standard. And today, we all saw the opposite. A woman seated near the aisle slowly nodded. The businessman nearby tilted his head slightly, as if accepting her apology with deep respect. Tracey continued, I am committed to making sure this never happens again. Starting today, I will initiate a full review of our flight attendant training programs and implement additional courses on bias awareness, professional conduct, and ethical service. I want to ensure that every passenger, regardless of skin color, gender, or social status, is treated with absolute respect when flying with us. She turned to look at Grace, the young flight attendant, with wide, teary eyes. Grace. Grace flinched slightly, then stood straight, uncertain what would come next. Tracey smiled. I noticed that you tried to speak up at the right time. Despite the pressure of the job and your superior's presence, you ultimately made the right choice. She stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. For your professionalism and courage today, I will be recommending you for a promotion. My airline needs people who put fairness above fear. Grace remained silent for a moment, then nodded, her voice trembling. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tracey. I only did what I believed was right. Tracey smiled. Sometimes, doing what's right is the hardest thing. The entire cabin erupted in applause, a recognition that needed no explanation, a celebration not of power, but of courage and integrity. A few days after the incident, the video capturing the moment Tracey revealed her true identity and dismissed the head flight attendant, Anna, spread across social media like wildfire. Millions of shares, hundreds of thousands of comments, not just because of the dramatic twist, but because of Tracey's calm demeanor, powerful presence, and the unshakable message she left behind. Television networks, morning talk shows, and even international press all mentioned the name Tracey Williams, a black female CEO who dared to speak out against prejudice right on her aircraft. In a live interview, the host leaned forward toward Tracey, eyes filled with admiration. Ms. Tracey, the video of your flight has now surpassed 80 million views in just 3 days. Do you have any message for the people watching? Tracey sat up straight, her eyes steady, her voice calm yet assertive. Respect is a right, not a privilege. The host nodded slowly. Tracey continued. Every human being, regardless of what they wear, what color their skin is, or where they sit on a plane, deserves to be treated with kindness. The host asked, what would you say to those who've ever been looked down upon because of how they look or where they come from? Tracey paused for a beat, then responded firmly. I want them to remember this. Strength doesn't come from titles or wealth. Strength comes from knowing who you are and never letting anyone make you forget it. The studio erupted in applause. Not because of Tracey's fame, but because a truth long buried had finally been spoken. Simple. At the same time, on the official website of the airline Tracey owned, a statement was posted. We are committed to immediately implementing anti-racial bias policies, reviewing our entire flight crew, and retraining in professional conduct to ensure every passenger, without exception, will be treated with absolute respect. The hashtag's number. Respect is a right, and number Tracey's message began trending across social media platforms. Thousands of people shared their own stories of times they'd been discriminated against for their race, gender, or appearance, and how they found the courage to stand up for themselves. Tracey's story didn't end in the first-class cabin that day. It became a wake-up call to the service industry, to society, and every individual. That kindness should never be conditional, and dignity should never be diminished just because someone believes they're above another. A few weeks after the incident shook the airline industry, Tracey boarded another flight. Still, it was first class, still the familiar luxury, but the atmosphere was completely different. As she stepped onto the plane, a young head flight attendant approached her, eyes sincere, smile gentle. Welcome aboard, Ms. Tracey Williams. It's truly an honor to serve you today. Tracey gave a slight nod, returning the smile. Not because of the flattery, but because of the sincerity. the kind of respect that wasn't born out of fear or status, but from something simpler: understanding. She settled into her seat, gazing out the window. The sky beyond was endlessly blue, sunlight gleaming on the aeroplane wing like a greeting. Beneath them were layers of clouds, cities, and people walking forward, with hope for a world more just than yesterday. An assistant leaned in and whispered in Tracey's ear, "We've just received the latest report. Since the incident, nearly 200 discrimination-related complaints from passengers across the network have been processed. The new policies are starting to take effect." Tracey nodded. She didn't expect perfection overnight, but she believed one right step, one moment of courage, could become a spark that spreads far and wide. That evening, on a major television program about women in leadership, Tracey appeared in a sleek black suit, her face confident, her eyes warm. When asked, "Do you think what you did on that plane was an unnecessary confrontation?" Tracey smiled. "I wasn't confronting. I simply chose not to bow my head." The studio erupted in thunderous applause. The following day, an 8-year-old black girl sat in her living room with her mother, rewatching the video on YouTube. The little girl whispered, "Mommy, I want to own an airline like her one day." The mother hugged her tight, eyes brimming with tears and joy. "And you will, because you know you deserve to." That day, high above the earth, the plane, named Tracey Airlines, glided silently through the clouds, leaving behind a soft white trail, like a straight line drawn across the sky. Like the mark of a woman who had proven, respect isn't something to beg for, it's something to claim. And from that moment on, the world was never quite the same again.